The day my world tilted off its axis started like any other. I woke up next to my wife, Claire, to the sound of birds chirping outside our window. I thought about how lucky I was to have a loving partner, a beautiful home, and a promising career in marketing. But by the time I went to bed that evening, everything I believed to be true would come crashing down around me. I remember the moment the first crack appeared in my reality. It was a mundane Tuesday, and I had just returned home from work early, eager to surprise Claire with dinner. As I walked through the door, I found her on the phone, her voice barely above a whisper. It was strange to hear her so secretive, but I brushed it off as a work-related conversation. It wasn't until I noticed the look of panic in her eyes as she hung up that my instincts kicked in. Something felt off. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more signs: the late nights at work, the sudden bursts of energy, the texts she quickly hid when I entered the room. Each small detail piled onto my growing suspicions. The nagging thought that she might be having an affair gnawed at me. It was a darkness that settled in my gut and refused to leave. One evening, after particularly unsettling whispers of conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked in, I made the decision to hire a private investigator. It was a step I never thought I'd take, but my gut told me I needed more than just circumstantial evidence. I needed to know the truth. The investigator, a grizzled man named Jack, was thorough. After a few days, he reported back to me with unsettling news. "I've followed her," he said, his voice gruff. "She's been meeting a man, Mark, I believe his name is. They've met several times, usually late at night." My heart sank as I listened. The picture he painted was vivid and painful. He provided details: restaurant locations, timestamps, even photos of them together, their smiles a slap in the face of everything I thought I knew. But rather than confront Claire with the evidence, I decided to take a different approach. I would wield this information like a weapon. The first time I confronted her was a calculated move. I'd arranged for a casual dinner at home, complete with her favorite meal. As she settled in, I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of guilt or hesitation. We laughed and chatted, the atmosphere light, but inside I was simmering. After dinner, I pulled out a photo of Claire and Mark, taken by Jack just a few nights prior. "What's this, Claire?" I asked, my voice steady, as I laid the picture on the table between us. Her eyes widened, panic washing over her face. "Where did you get that?" I leaned back, a slight smile creeping onto my lips. "Let's just say I have my sources. I didn't think you'd mind if I wanted to know about your little meetings." Her expression shifted from panic to defiance. "You have no right to invade my privacy, Alex. This is ridiculous." I raised my hand to silence her. "You're right, I don't. But here's the deal: I can either take this information and expose you, or we can make a deal." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I want you to be honest with me," I said, my tone calm yet firm. "I want to know everything about this affair and whatever else you might be hiding. If you can give me that, I won't go public with this. You'll keep your secrets safe, and we can move on with our lives." Claire stared at me, processing my words. "You're blackmailing me." "Call it what you want," I replied, leaning in closer. "But this is an opportunity for you to come clean without facing the consequences. We can work together to decide how we want to move forward." For a moment she looked defeated, but then something shifted in her demeanor. "Fine," she said, her voice low and controlled. "But this doesn't mean you can control my life." I couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. I had taken the reins, and for the first time Claire was on the back foot. Over the next few weeks, I crafted scenarios that forced Claire into a position of vulnerability. I would casually bring up past secrets, her struggles with anxiety, the financial issues we had faced together, and frame them as part of the larger conversation about trust. Each time she felt cornered, she would divulge small pieces of information about her life and our marriage. With every session of confession, I pushed for more details about her affair, how she met Mark, what drew her to him, and what their plans were. The more she talked, the more I learned about the cracks in our relationship. I began to see that this affair was not just about her lust, it was rooted in something deeper: her dissatisfaction with our life together. One day, as we were cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon a box filled with old mementos from our early days together. I held up a framed picture of us from our honeymoon, the carefree smiles on our faces reminding me of happier times. "Do you remember this?" I asked, my voice light. Claire glanced over, her expression softening. "Yeah, I remember," she said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. I seized the opportunity. What happened to us, Claire? Why do you feel the need to seek comfort elsewhere? Her face hardened, the vulnerability giving way to defensiveness. You wouldn't understand. You're always so busy with work. You never have time for me. The statement stung, but I held my ground. So cheating was the answer. It was never supposed to be like this, she snapped, her anger boiling over. I just wanted to feel alive again. And just like that, I saw the chink in her armor. I had provoked her to reveal her true feelings, and now I had the upper hand. If you want to feel alive, why not start by being honest with yourself? Let's talk about it, Claire. You know I want to help. The emotional exchanges continued, and through them, I learned not only about her affair but also about her discontent with life. The situation began to blur the lines between blackmail and therapy, revealing the fragility of our marriage. Each confession chipped away at the walls she had built, exposing her insecurities and frustrations. It was during one of these conversations that I discovered a secret I hadn't anticipated. Claire had been harboring resentment about a business opportunity I had turned down years ago, an opportunity that could have transformed both our lives. If only you'd taken that chance with me, she said, tears streaming down her face. Maybe things would be different. I watched her, realizing that her infidelity wasn't solely about Mark, it was about the life she felt we could have had. Her affair was an escape from the monotony she felt, a desperate attempt to find excitement. Then came the day that would change everything, a crucial pitch meeting with potential investors for a project I had been working on for months. I had arranged for Claire to join me, a calculated move that would serve as the ultimate test of her commitment and honesty. The day of the meeting I could sense her anxiety. She was dressed impeccably, her nerves palpable, as we entered the conference room filled with investors eager to hear our proposal. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment where everything would either fall into place or come crashing down. As I introduced our project, I laid the groundwork for a discussion on transparency, trust, and teamwork, qualities I believed were essential for any partnership. Claire stood beside me, her expression shifting from confident to uncertain as the meeting progressed. Midway through the presentation, I casually mentioned, Claire, you remember how we discussed trust and communication, right? Why don't you tell our investors how you've helped shape our vision? She blinked, the color draining from her face. The room fell silent, and I could see the panic in her eyes. I interjected, we've been through a lot together, haven't we, Claire? I think our journey reflects the importance of these values. Realizing what I was doing, Claire hesitated. Yes, of course. Trust is vital in any partnership, she stammered, her voice shaky. The investors nodded, their interest piqued, but I wasn't finished. I leaned in, my voice low yet firm. And what happens when trust is broken? How do we rebuild it? Claire's expression morphed from confusion to alarm, and I could see the realization hit her like a tidal wave. I had orchestrated this moment, and now she was caught in the web of her own lies. Well, she fumbled, her eyes darting around the room. Trust can be challenging, but it's crucial to communicate and address issues head-on. Exactly, I said, pushing further. But what if those issues stem from deeper dissatisfaction? What if someone feels trapped in a partnership that doesn't fulfill them? The room grew tense, and I could see Claire's facade crumbling. David, please, she began, but I pressed on, relentless. And what happens when someone seeks comfort outside of their relationship, I asked, my heart racing. How do we navigate that? The investors shifted in their seats, clearly caught off guard. Claire's expression shifted from panic to desperation, and I could sense her struggle to maintain control. I think it's important to recognize the reasons behind those actions, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. As she spoke, I leaned closer, locking eyes with her. But at what cost, Claire? What happens when the truth comes to light? In that moment, the room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. Claire's face flushed, and I could see the realization dawning on her. This was it. She was standing at the precipice of her choices, and I was the one pushing her over the edge. I think she began, but before she could finish, one of the investors raised a hand, interrupting her. Claire, are you saying that trust has been compromised in your partnership? The question hung in the air, and I held my breath, waiting for her response. She looked at me, and I could see the fight within her beginning to fade. Yes, she finally admitted, her voice trembling. trust has been broken." Gasps echoed around the room as the weight of her admission settled over us. The investors exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of shock and sympathy. "Can you elaborate on what you mean?" one investor pressed, clearly intrigued by the unfolding drama. With tears in her eyes, Claire took a deep breath. "I made mistakes," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I sought comfort outside my marriage, and I understand how that has affected our trust." I watched as the realization washed over her. This was the moment where everything would change. No longer was she in control of the narrative. The truth had emerged, and the consequences were laid bare for all to see. As the meeting concluded, the investors expressed their gratitude for our honesty, their interest in our project seemingly renewed despite the unexpected drama. But I knew that Claire's world had just shifted irrevocably. In the days that followed, Claire and I faced the fallout of that meeting. The truth had been exposed, and there was no turning back. We spent long nights discussing our marriage, our future, and the choices that had brought us to this point. As we navigated the aftermath, I realized that the blackmail had transformed from a weapon of control into an opportunity for growth. Claire began to take responsibility for her actions, seeking therapy and committing to understanding the motivations behind her choices. Through our struggles, we found unexpected alliances in the form of friends and family who offered their support. They helped us see that rebuilding trust was possible, but it would take time, patience, and a willingness to confront our darkest fears. In the end, what had begun as a journey of deception evolved into a path of healing and honesty. Claire and I faced the shadows of our past together, determined to forge a new future based on transparency, trust, and the willingness to face our truths head-on. As we stood at the crossroads of our marriage, I understood that betrayal, while painful, had opened the door to a deeper connection. We learned that honesty, even when uncomfortable, could pave the way for a stronger foundation. And so we began to rebuild not just our marriage but our lives, finding strength in the vulnerabilities we had both hidden for far too long. In the end, the shadows of our past would no longer dictate our future. Instead, we would write our own story, one grounded in the lessons learned from betrayal and the power of redemption.